I think that anybody who can become the national champion in
Gymnastics.
gymnastics, but in anything, in any sport,
Agree.
is going to have some kind of innate talent. But then it also is, I'm sure, a lot of diligent work. Did that kind of work as a kid mess you up as an adult at all? Because I know, like, I used to ride bike like an obsessive person and race
Yeah.
them. And I would
Yeah.
hear about professional cyclists who would stop riding bikes and get fat, like almost every one of them. Was there any kind of
Yeah.
issue like that with you?
Oh, I had so many issues. I mean, first of all, I think, you're right. It's this kind of bizarre combination of natural talent, but a willingness to just work beyond what people can even imagine. I mean, imagine being 11 years old and training 40 hours a week. Like,
Right.
that's insane. Imagine being 13 and begging your parents to let you move away from home to live with a coach. Um, and then the eating disorders are rampant in the sport. We were weighed in twice a day. Our weight was announced over the loudspeaker. We were told you need to lose 2 pounds by any means necessary by tomorrow. We already had like 2% body fat. I didn't even get my period until I was 20
Oh my God.
because of the low body fat. But then when I left for college and I had a sandwich, I gained like 40 pounds because I hadn't eaten for so long. So I was super messed up. I think the way that I was most messed up when I left the sport was just I mean, it was post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, I trained on a broken ankle for 2 years. I hated myself and I thought I was nothing without these abusive coaches. I had Stockholm syndrome essentially, and I had to figure out that I was a person of value without gymnastics, without them, that I had a
Right.
brain, what gymnastics was not the end of the road for me. And I was lucky enough to get to go to Stanford, and I met all these athletes. Like, Stanford's this unique place where it's an incredible academic school, but it's an incredible sports school also, which is unusual. And I met all these athletes who would go on to become professional baseball players, professional tennis players, and my career was over. And not only was it over, I was completely, unraveled from having
Right.
participated in it. So I had to figure out what I was gonna do. Like, I felt like I was retiring in the old age home, and everybody else is so excited and ready to start their life. And I'm like, oh my God, I need a nap.
Right.
So I had a lot of things to sort through. How to get through the eating disorder, I had to get through my rage and anger and resentment at the sport, and I had to get through my very serious imposter syndrome. I just believed I had no worth.
What was the most helpful thing? If there was any one thing in there that you think helped you more than anything else, what was it?
The resilience and the resolve and the discipline I learned in sports, but probably had naturally, I applied to healing myself.
Right.
And it's interesting, at about 25 years old, I was definitely full on feminist. I have no problem still claiming that word, even though I know a lot of women don't like it on the right and the left. To me, it's simple. Women deserve equal opportunity. We deserve the right to vote, own property, get a divorce if we want to. I mean, it's not anything crazy. Um, but I realized as this like full on feminist activist that if I was concerning myself all day with the size of my butt and the number on the scale, that was a waste of my potential. 90% of my thoughts were consumed with this. And I was like, what are you doing? Most
Yeah.
guys aren't doing this. And so, would you advocate a friend do this? Like, you're reducing your value to how you look, and that's not what you believe.
Right.
Jen, I'm talking to myself here.
Sure.
Um,
No, no, I get it. It speaks to me very much too.
and so I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. I threw the
Yeah.
scale away. Um, I ate what I wanted. And it's interesting because my weight after I left, I ballooned and then I sort of came down. But until I said, you know what, this doesn't matter, then I found my normal self,
Right.
where my thoughts weren't consumed with food all the time, either to lose weight or to just eat like a, obsessive. I kind of found the set point of what I was supposed to be. The other thing that helped was having children, as you might
Yeah.
imagine.
Sure.
I had my first child when I was 30, which at the time was really young in San Francisco. Like, all my friends did it much later. Doesn't sound young, but well, now it does because I'm 55. But you realize, one, my body has this other purpose. So what am I like? This aesthetic stuff is stupid. And two, my life has another purpose.
Yeah.
And so it really kind of takes the focus off of yourself and I think puts it on what matters. So
Yeah. It's
those
the
two things.
It's the oddest thing, and I've talked to all my friends who have kids about this, and like I vacillate between like this is a deeply spiritual experience or this is biology and it's some hormone that's triggered in my brain that attaches me to this other human being that I'm incapable of being attached to somebody who I haven't helped create, you know? But like
Yeah.
for me too, kids was one of those things where it just aligned my priorities in such a
Yeah.
way where it was like, oh, this that I'm concentrating on really doesn't matter at all.
I think that's totally right. Although I will say I also care about other things, like, and I think for a lot of women, their children become everything, especially when they have them late in life. And I was very much immersed in this, San Francisco mindset, and everybody had kids in their 40s and they had one. And then this child was like this overmanaged, precious little like glass thing that they, helicoptered to death. I also feel like I care about other things and it's okay. I'm still a person and it's
Yeah,
okay for me to still pursue these other things. And I don't have
sure.
to be my child's entertainment all the time. And that's not good for them or for me. So I guess both and, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure you've observed it. Where do you live?
Well, we live all over the place, but our children were raised in Los Angeles.
Right. So I'm sure you've seen it there. These like just like the hyper helicopter parents and managing every aspect of your child's life, and they don't learn to make decisions or stand on their own or any of that. And so I really try to not, I don't even have to try, like I don't want to do that. Um, and I saw that, I had my first kid in 2000 and it's just gotten worse. My kids are very far apart because I also have one born in 2016. So there's four of them
Wow.
spread apart. And I've seen that, which was starting in the early 2000s, just intensify. And these kids are just not equipped to like do anything on their own. They've just been managed like veal in a pen,
Yeah.
for so long. And so I don't want to raise those kinds of children. I want to raise children who are resilient and who can pick themselves up when they fail, because failure is inevitable, and can make good decisions in the moment for themselves because maybe they've met a bad one before and they
Yeah.
dealt with the repercussions of that. So the point being, kids did realign my priorities. And I continue to care about my professional life and my work. And I take great pride and joy in work. I love work, meaning
Yeah.
like not work like my job, but I love working and making things and making progress and working with people. I love all that. So that still matters to me.
Well, I first heard your name towards the early part of the pandemic. You know, I have four girls
Oh,
from
wow.
they're now, I don't remember exactly what their ages were at the time. Now they're the oldest is 28, the youngest is 17. I have a granddaughter and a grandson now. And like, but I remember two of them were in college on the East Coast at the
Yeah.
time. One of them was in a boarding school in the Pacific Northwest. So they all come home and in the beginning, I was like, I don't know what this is. We don't know what this is. I've got a freezer full of meat and a couple 100 pounds of rice. And my wife told me in February to buy toilet paper. So we're not even a part of the toilet paper rush. You know what I mean? Like I sat down with her and
You're like, we're good.
I said to
Yeah.
her, I've got water, meat, rice, canned vegetables. What do you want or need if we can't leave the house for a while? And she said toilet paper. And I was like, toilet paper? What do you mean? Like, I never would have thought of that. Okay, I'll go buy some toilet paper. So I stocked up
Cute.
on that. And then it was the first thing to go. And I was like, you're a genius. You're so prescient about this toilet paper thing. I would have just taken a shower a couple of times a day. You know what I mean? Like that would have been my solution. Um,
That's a good solution. I
yeah,
like
I don't know. It wouldn't have crossed my mind, but very early on, I think it was like 3 weeks in, my wife and one of our daughters, and we lived in Los Angeles right near this big public park called Griffith Park, which is
I
like
know it. Yeah.
hiking trails.
Yeah.
It's not a park in New York City that gets crowded. You know, maybe
Right.
a birthday party in some area might get crowded, but like
Right.
you can go, I can do a 2 hour hike through Griffith Park
Not
and not
see anyone.
pass a person. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they walked from our house to Griffith Park, and somebody in a car started yelling at them about social distancing and masking. And they were outside. And my wife was like, we live together. Like, and we're outside. We're nowhere near other people. And this guy was enraged with her. And right away, I became somewhat disillusioned with society's reaction to this thing. You know, my wife had some of her family owned medical buildings, and the doctors in these buildings were saying there's going to be triage in every public place next Tuesday. And next Tuesday never came. Every week she'd be told this. And then finally we were like, this thing that we're being told is happening is not happening the way they're saying it's going to happen. This is an overreaction. So when I saw, I don't know if it was Twitter or it was a news story, and I saw you speaking out and going like, why are we punishing our children? It like sang to me, you know, because really for me and my wife, we had a nice time. All our kids came home and that was nice. But then they were also the ones suffering. Like it wasn't hard for her and I, it was really
Yeah.
hard for them.
Yeah, and I lived in San Francisco at the time. I don't anymore. I left during the pandemic so that my youngest children could go to school. I had kids, one in college at public university in California, one in high school at public school, one starting elementary, and one in preschool. So I like saw all the ages. But you know, I was a long time San Francisco public school parent. My kid was a junior, about to be a senior. I knew the student population. I knew that 60% were on free or reduced lunch. Like these are low income children. I was the only person of my kind of class, which makes me a class traitor, that sent their kids to public school, you know, and all those people in San Francisco. So I didn't even have a moment, my husband and I, where we were like, okay, this seems reasonable. We were from the beginning like, this is not reasonable. This is never going to end.
Right.
There is no off ramp. You know, they closed the schools March 13th, 2020. We were like, hell no. And there was already plenty of data that showed that the median age of death was over 80. Like this was not
Yes.
harmful to children. We knew it from the beginning. Don't let anyone tell you ever we didn't know and we did the best we could. It's total bullshit. We did know and we did the worst that we possibly could. And poor, vulnerable children were harmed the most. Children bore the brunt of this. And whether they were, you know, middle or upper income, they still suffered from isolation and all of it. But we just put the burden on children. It's horrible what we did to children. And I think, you know, people ask me all the time, why did you do it? Because I was very outspoken from the beginning. And as you can imagine, that was not very popular in San Francisco. I mean, I had people chasing me down the street, screaming at me that I was a murderer and no one would be sad for me when all my children died.
It's madness. It's
Psychotic.
madness.
These people, everybody lost their fucking minds. And you know what makes me crazy? So, and some of us were out there from the beginning, very few of us, but some of us were out there from the beginning and we were taking a lot of heat. I have lost almost every single friend I ever had for the last 30 years. Almost. A few have stood by me. I ultimately had to, you know, leave the city that I loved and lived in for 33 years because I was literally being harassed and chased out. People were publishing my address online. People were calling, you know, the ethics hotline at my work to say that I was a murderer. I mean, I had to leave. I had
Because
to leave.
you said this was not health, this was not the healthy reaction for children.
Yes. And I kept it to children, even though I was opposed to all of it, because I thought children were like this gateway drug that we could all agree, the bridge, right? We could all agree we don't want to hurt children. Meanwhile, in the fall of 2020, all the private schools start opening and all, you know, it's just like it was so structurally classist and let's racist, even though I was the one being called a racist. The racist policy was keeping Black children out of school while rich white children went to school, which is exactly what happened in every major city in America. So I was harassed and hounded, and I didn't stop. You know, it was a difficult time. You know, it was a very difficult time. But I wish someone had stood up for me when I was a child and abuse and mistreatment was happening. That's what kept going through my head. Who was going to stand up for these children?